Welcome to episode 38 of Wonders and Miracles. I'm your host, Liza Lawrence. God speaks in many ways. Welcome to Wonders and Miracles podcast, where we celebrate miraculous moments in everyday lives. I'm your host, Liza Lawrence, a wife, mother, teacher, and miracle lover. If you're new to this podcast, this is what we do here. Each week on Miracle Monday, we celebrate awe-inspiring true stories from regular people like you and me. People who have experienced something surprising and wonderful that could be considered the work of a divine source. My desire is to help us recognize God's hand and His love in our lives, because the more miracles we notice, the more miracles happen. Thanks for listening to the show. Now let's celebrate wonders and miracles together. Job 37:5 and Ezekiel 2:2. God thundered marvelously with His voice. Great things doeth He, which we cannot comprehend. And the Spirit entered into me when He spake unto me, and set me upon my feet, and I heard Him that spake unto me. Today, my friend Sammy shares an intensely fearful moment in her life when her 2-year-old drowned in a lake. Had she not followed the subtle prompting to invite her sister-in-law to join her outing, things might not have turned out as miraculous as they did. Listen today to hear Sammy's powerful witness that God speaks to us in different ways according to our needs at that time. I'm so glad Sammy's willing to share this story. It was interesting. I asked her to share this 9 months ago when it happened. She had shared it at church, and I was so touched by the story, and she wasn't ready. It was still too raw, and I'm so proud of her for honoring her own space and her readiness. She came to me a couple weeks ago and said, I'm ready to share that story. It's such a beautiful example of the miraculous moments in our everyday lives and how God is aware of all things. I'm grateful that she is here to share it with us today. But first, I want to give a shout out to the review of the week. This is from my Facebook page. I have a Facebook page called Wonders and Miracles Podcast. You can join that group and get updates on each show. You can see pictures of who's sharing. I'm also on Instagram. You can jump onto Instagram. Wonders and Miracles is my handle there. And I post pictures of who's talking and who's sharing the stories as well. So this is a recommendation on my Facebook page from Danielle McGinnis. And she says, I love, capital letters, love feel-good stories. Thanks, Danielle, for that recommendation. I'd love it if you could go onto iTunes and write a review for the podcast. If you haven't done that yet, I would really appreciate it. Also, spread the word, forward this to a family member, a friend, text it to them, send them the link, and uplift their day as well. Now let's jump into Sammy's story. I hope you enjoy this one. So I'm here with Sammy today, and she is going to share a miracle story that happened about 9 months ago with her 2-year-old that had a drowning accident. And I'm really excited to hear the details of this story and to have you hear this story because it's such a tender, beautiful story. So Sammy, thank you so much for being willing to share, and let's hear what happened.
So I'm going to start out with a little backstory on my daughter. Her name's Presley. Before she was born, I had lost a child. I was probably about 9 weeks pregnant and went in for an ultrasound, and I was by myself. And they put it on, and there was no heartbeat. And it turned out that I had placenta accreta, which caused me to lose the child. It was really hard. It's kind of scary in a pregnancy, and I didn't know if I was going to try again. That was going to be my last pregnancy. I'm type 1 diabetic. I've got some issues and my pregnancies are hard. A little while later, I had decided that it was time to try again. I got pregnant with Presley. It was a really hard pregnancy. When she was born, I had this instant impression that she needed to be here. And if I hadn't lost that child before, she could not have come because I couldn't have carried another child. When she was about 9 months old, I was trying to get my kids ready to take a bath. My two youngest girls, Dempsey and Presley. Presley was about 9 months and Dempsey was almost 3. I was getting ready to put them in the bath and I needed to run downstairs and find towels and clothes for them. And I've got 5 kids. And so my laundry is usually washed, but it's a harder job to get it folded and put away. So I was down digging through this enormous pile of clothes in front of my dryer and I was flustered. We were getting ready to go somewhere. We were in a hurry. So I was just digging through and I heard the water turn on upstairs and I yelled up to Dempsey, turn the water off. And she did. And I started digging again. And then the water came back on. I just yelled up again, Dempsey, turn the water off. She didn't turn it off that time. And I was kind of just trying to hurry so that I could get back upstairs. When I heard this, it was a yell, go now. And I dropped everything that I had and I ran up the stairs as fast as I could. And Presley was sitting in this water that was as hot as it would go. It was scalding hot, and she had her hands and her feet down in the water, and she wasn't making a noise. She was just shaking because it had hurt her so bad. I turned the water off and pulled her up. The skin was hanging off of her feet. I just remember thinking, I wouldn't have known anything was wrong. She wasn't making a sound. There was no sounds of distress. Even when I got outside my bathroom door, they sounded fine. But Heavenly Father had yelled at me that I needed to stop what I was doing and get upstairs to get her.
So now tell us the story that happened to Presley now that she's 2 years old, that just recently happened with her.
About 9 months ago, all of my sisters and our kids and my sister-in-law, there's about 21 grandbabies on my mom's side, decided to go to Rigby Lake. We'd been planning on going for a few days. I got up and was getting in the shower to get ready to go. And I had this impression that I needed to call my sister-in-law. She's from California and she was in town and I needed to call her and invite her to go with us. And I kind of just brushed it off because I was thinking, if that were me and someone called me and said, hey, do you want to go to the lake in an hour? Get all your kids ready, go find all your stuff and go. I would have been like.
And was she heading out of town that day?
She was on her way to Blackfoot with my mother-in-law because her phone had broken and they needed to get her a new phone and they couldn't find one. And so, yes, they were heading to Blackfoot.
Which is like, 45 minutes away or so?
Yes. And I was just in the bathroom. I got in the shower and just felt it again. You need to call your sister-in-law. You need to call Aubrey and ask her to come. And I turned the water off and I got out of the shower and I called her. I just said, me and all my family are heading to Rigby Lake. I would love for you to come with us. I know it's kind of a pain in the butt because you're not ready to go, but I was like, I just thought I'd invite you. I don't want you to feel left out kind of thing. She is like, well, I'll see. We'll try to get there. But she was thinking, oh my goodness, we have all these things to do. They're not ready. They were literally driving to Blackfoot. And she got the impression that they were going to be leaving soon and her kids needed to go play with their cousins. And so they went back, got all their stuff to go to the lake with us. There were a few of our husbands that were there. Like Tyler had a couple of my kids out on a kayak. We were sitting under an umbrella. We were right next to the water. They were just swimming. They had life jackets on. Like we were being so careful. I'm a very protective person with my kids. I know my 11-year-old, when I tell him, you have to have a life jacket on to go in the water. He's like, Mom, I know how to swim. I'm like, yeah, but you're not really very good at swimming. You need to have a life jacket on. And they hate it. And that's one of the things. I'm like, she had a life jacket on, but she had put her sister's life jacket on. And we were sitting there talking and I looked out in the water. I was like, what is Dempsey doing? I'm like, what is she looking at? Because she was just floating with her face down in the water. Dempsey's my 5-year-old and she can put her face under the water. And I kind of saw her arm do like a swimming motion and her feet kicked a couple times and then she just stopped. And my sister, Riley, got to her first. She got up and just started running and I was right behind her and she pulled her out of the water and I looked at her and I just was like, it's not Dempsey, it's Presley. My Presley, she's pretty tall for her age, and Dempsey's just super short. They've got about the same length of hair, and when it's wet, you can't hardly tell the difference between them. And so it was just kind of like this group of things that had happened that I couldn't have predicted happening, and I never would have guessed it. They were in life jackets. They were, I was being safe. I was right by the water. I watched it happen. I watched her to her last kick. And that's kind of the most haunting thing for me, is that if she had died, I would have watched it happen while I was sitting in the sand, wondering what she was doing.
Yeah, that's a mother's worst nightmare right there.
I got out right behind my sister, and she'd pulled her out, and we were both holding her, and she was completely blue. And I was struggling to get her life jacket off of her. I don't honestly remember much about it. My brain was just in such a whirl, and I couldn't think. And I know how to do CPR. I've done training for years and years through girls' camp, worked at the hospital for a couple years in the NICU, but I was panicking completely. And so I was standing there holding her, and I was just screaming. And I don't really remember doing it, but I was screaming at Tyler, just screaming his name and saying, "It's Presley, it's Presley. Tyler, she's blue."
And where was he? Could he hear you? Was he out in the lake?
Yeah, he was out on the lake on a kayak with my boys, I believe. So he was paddling to get over there, but he was so far out that he couldn't get there. Like I said, I was struggling to get her life jacket off, just holding her, but not really knowing what I was supposed to do. My brain just completely shut down. My entire world was just like crashing. I was lost. And my sister-in-law, Aubrey, came and pulled her out of my arms and put her on the ground and started doing CPR. And she had worked at a hospital for years. I honestly don't even remember how long it took. I think that she did 3 or 4 rounds of CPR, and she'd finally started throwing up water, and then she stopped again and was still blue, and she kept doing CPR, and she threw up again. And that time she started screaming. And it was the best noise that I've ever heard in my life. Someone had called 911, and I think my mom was screaming, "Somebody call for help, somebody get help." And that's why I think that it took a lot longer than I thought, because while I was sitting down there, I heard the sirens coming. I think that Aubrey was still holding her, picked her up and ran her up to the grass so that the EMTs could meet her there. And I remember there was another lady who was there. I don't know her. I can't tell you what she looks like. I never got her name. And she sat by me the whole time as I watched all of this happening, with her arm around me, just telling me, "It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay." And when we'd gotten up to the grass, the EMTs took her, and they were trying to get all of her vitals. And she was just screaming at him. She didn't want him to touch her. And this woman says, "You need to give her to her mom. Like, her mom needs to hold her." I was just sitting there, just on my knees, just bawling. And all of these people had come and started standing around us with towels and whatever they could hold up to kind of block the scene so that people weren't just watching us. So they handed her to me and were able to get her oxygen levels. And then they said, "We need to get her to the hospital. We need to make sure that she's okay." And they said, "Is it okay if we take her in the ambulance?" And my thought was just, yes, please. Whatever we need to do to get her safe, we'll do. And so they let me hold her, and we climbed into the back of the ambulance and sat on the bed thing that they have back there. And they strapped me into the bed holding her. And I wish so much that I knew these people that were there that were helping me. The EMT that was riding in the back with me kept trying to get the O2 monitor on her finger, and she was just screaming at him, throwing it at him. And I was so happy that she was so angry, because it was her personality. And I was glad that she had herself there. And he was so good. And he's like, "It's okay." He's like, "We're just going to go get to the hospital. They'll check her out there. She's okay." And I'm holding her, and pretty soon she just kind of starts falling asleep. But I'm thinking, she's going again. She's leaving me again. And I would start, Presley, get up, Presley. And she's okay. He's like, she's tired. He's like, that was the hardest thing that her body has ever been through. And she's so tired, but I couldn't let her sleep. And so there were about 3 times on the way to the hospital. She'd kind of start to fall asleep, and this panic would rise in me again. Get up. You have to wake up. You have to be awake. I have to be able to know that you're okay, that you're alive, that you're breathing, that you can scream at me, that you can scream at him. And we pulled up to the hospital, and it was the most amazing thing. I got out of the ambulance holding her, and we were in the little roundabout that the ambulances go through to get to the emergency room. And they opened up the doors to the ambulance, and every single doctor and nurse that was working in the emergency room was standing out on the sidewalk waiting for her to come in. And I just had this feeling of so much peace that they were there for her. They were all there to make sure that she was okay. And I walked in, and then my dad was there because he wasn't at the lake, which was like the best thing. I mean, it was my dad. Like, he hugged me, and that was another thing that just, I was like, it's going to be okay. Like, my dad's here and we're here, and they've got her. And so they took her into one of the just emergency rooms right there and did a x-ray on her chest. Then they said, we're going to go put you in a room. We'll let you know what we see, what we need to do from here. So we went back, and about 30 minutes to an hour, maybe, they came in with this x-ray, and they just said, there's nothing there. She's fine.
Wow, what a blessing.
There was no water in her lungs. There was no anything. And they said, we want to keep her overnight to make sure that she doesn't develop something. They have that secondary drowning, which happens when the water accumulates again in their lungs. And so even after someone has come up and they've done CPR and they're okay, hours, days later, they can have this secondary drowning. Their lungs will just fill with water again. And I'd known about it because I had read about it on Facebook or something. And so it was like, we just want to keep her here just to make sure. We'll do another x-ray tomorrow. And depending on how that goes, we'll let you know what we need to do. And so she probably threw up, I think at least six more times that night. She couldn't hold anything down. She was just coughing up all this water, just so much water. I couldn't even believe that she had so much water in her body. And then while we were there, all my brothers and sisters came up, my sister-in-laws, their kids, everyone just needed to see her and see that she was okay. And my younger sister, not my youngest one that got her out of the water, but my younger sister, Kelso, had left right before it happened. It wasn't even until later that I thought, thank goodness she wasn't there, because she feels things so deeply. And I just thought, I'm so glad that she didn't see that, because I don't think that she could have shaken it off. But she's one of the first ones that came up to the hospital with her daughter's jammies so that Presley could change out of her swimming suit and have something warm to wear. And then she went over to the mall and bought me a change of clothes because we were all just sitting there in our swimsuits in the hospital.
Wow, that is really thoughtful, because you sort of wouldn't think about something like that. But that was a sweet gesture for her to consider your comfort. I love that.
I was so glad that she was there to see her okay. I know my youngest sister that pulled her out of the water, she took my kids to her house and she had my kids, so she didn't get to come up to the hospital. And I know that she still struggles because I can still feel her. I can still feel what it felt like to hold her lifeless. It's a weight like nothing that you could ever imagine. And my kids they're everyone's kids in my family. And their kids are my kids. Like, we've all grown up so close together. And I remember I sent her a picture when we were leaving the hospital of Presley, and she was standing in the elevator with her hand up against the panel with just this hugest smile on her face, holding this cow that my sister had brought, a stuffed cow, because she loves cows. And that's kind of how she lives. She is so happy to be here. And I don't think that she remembers what happened. She's terrified of water. Yeah, she doesn't like to lay in it. She knows that she drowned, but I don't think that she knows what happened to her or what it really means. But it changed her a lot. So before this accident had happened, she wasn't talking much. I mean, she was 2, but she wasn't really vocal. When we would go to church, she would scream anytime I tried to take her to nursery. She just did not want to be in there. And so I usually had her with me. But about 2 weeks after her accident, she just started speaking, like having conversations with people. We went to church on that Sunday and she walked right into nursery, turned around, said, "Bye, Mom," walked in and was fine. Just kind of showing me that I'm okay. And she potty trained herself in that week as well, which she was not even close to. She had no interest in even sitting on the toilet. And I think that she's got an old soul. She didn't talk much, but I think that she knew that I was struggling and that she needed to show me that she was okay. And so she did all these things so that I could see that she was fine.
I like that. I think that's true. She probably could sense that you needed to know that she was okay. So what are some of the big lessons that you've learned through this experience and even your other experience with her in the bathtub?
Through these experiences, the hugest thing for me was my testimony that God knows us so well. He knew when she was 9 months old that I was stressed out and floundering and kind of out of control with my life with 5 young children. And he yelled at me to go and get her. And this time, he just nudged me that I needed to call my sister-in-law to come, which were 2 completely different things, but both had so much strength that I needed to do it, whether it was yelling at me or through this calm, just call her. I've thought about that a lot because you hear a lot how you need to have kind of this inner peace, a stillness, a calm to be able to hear the Lord or to hear the Holy Ghost when they're trying to tell you something. And it's really taught me that God doesn't give us just one chance. He's not just going to say, like in my first situation when I was so stressed out and just digging, and he wasn't going to whisper it to me and then be like, well, she's not listening, so too bad for the baby up in the bathtub. He knew that I was flustered and he yelled at me because he knew that was the only way that I was going to be able to listen to him. And just the difference from that to this one where it was just that calm, you need to call her. It just bore this fire that he knows me and he understands when we're struggling and when we're having a hard time, and he doesn't expect us to be perfect. He doesn't expect us to always have our life under control. He doesn't base his help by how ready we are in that moment to hear it. He knew that he needed to yell at me. He knew that I needed that soft whisper. He knew that my sister needed to be there because he knew that I wasn't going to have my mind enough with me to be able to do what she needed. So he made sure that there was someone else there who did. Another thing that had happened there that I didn't see because it was while we were surrounded by these towels that people were holding up, and my mom had told me about it later, was that while we were under there, while I was sitting there with all these EMTs and these people that were trying to help her, that the people that were there at Rigby Lake were all just standing in groups, just praying for us. And there's a quote by Jeffrey R. Holland that says, "In the gospel of Jesus Christ, you have help from both sides of the veil, and you must never forget that. When disappointment and discouragement strike, you remember and never forget that if our eyes could be opened, we would see horses and chariots of fire as far as the eye can see, riding at reckless speed to come to our protection." I found that when I'd lost my baby before Presley was born, and it brought me so much peace then. And it's something that it pops up every so often on my Facebook memories, or it'll just come to my mind that it's so true. And that day I had help from those that were there that were praying for her. And I know that there were so many people on the other side that were holding me up and holding her up. And I feel like they were there with her when she was gone. And that's brought my heart so much peace, because it's a silly thing, but I'd thought she was alone and it killed me. And then I remember reading that again and I thought she was not alone. She was never alone. And I don't know who was there with her, but I know that there were people, probably family, that were there holding her up and just staying with her until she could come back to me again.
I love that. What a tender story and powerful lessons you learned from this. And I love what you said, that the Lord knows us so well and he knows how to reach us in the very moments that he needs to, whether loud or soft, he knows. And I think that is such an important message for us to learn. And you had a very big learning experience with that. Another question, your sister-in-law, how did she feel after this all happened? Did she recognize that she was an integral part in helping Presley because she did the CPR? After talking with her, how did she feel about this?
So I've talked with her a few times. I don't really like to talk about it, but I remember that weekend after it had happened, we'd gone over to my in-laws, and that's actually when I found out that she wasn't even planning on coming up, that they were going to do other things. But she told me that it wasn't her that did it. And she's like, and it feels weird people telling me that you saved her. She's like, I don't feel like I did that. And she says that she needed to be there and God made sure that she knew what she needed to do. She's one of the strongest people I know, and she lives in California, so I don't get to see her as often as I would like. We weren't as close as some of my other in-laws because she's so far away, but she holds this place in my heart now. Not that she couldn't have before, but it's like no matter how far away she is or how not often I get to see her, she's always right there now. And I think she's the same way. She's gotten so close to my kids, and especially Presley, but they share a connection now that they never could have in another way. And I don't wish for anyone to have to build a connection in that way, but it has made my relationship with my family so much stronger, my relationship with my in-laws so much stronger, and then my in-laws' relationships with my family so much stronger. And I know that my mom had told me that she'd kind of been struggling a little bit with not knowing what she was supposed to be doing for one of my brothers. And she said after this had happened that she just felt so much peace because she knew that all of these things that had happened in this situation were not by mistake. There were just too many coincidences. And it gave her such a testimony of the Lord's timing in things. And that just because things aren't going exactly how she would want them to, she knows that he's there and she knows that he's watching and that he is doing what he can for her while he can. And that it's going to be taken care of. Whatever that means and however that means, he knows what we're going through. And he's not just leaving us to try to figure it out on our own. Sometimes we don't know why things are happening, and sometimes we won't know why things have happened. And I've gained this testimony as well, is that God has a plan for us. And so whatever the reasonings are, I know that it's because of his plan and that it's all going to be for good eventually.
Yeah, that's another powerful lesson to learn in life, this whole journey. And I think when we have those powerful manifestations and experiences of the Lord's timing and intimately knowing what needs to happen and who needs to be there and all of that, I think it puts our hearts at ease and at peace that we can trust his plan. He's got it. He's got it all under control. And when we feel out of control, which we do in this life, he's in control. And knowing that hopefully can bring us peace, letting go and saying, the Lord's got it and I'm okay. So yeah, powerful lessons. I think it's a beautiful miracle story of the Lord orchestrating perfect people to be there in that moment for you. And I love that all the other people on the beach at that time at the lake stopped and paused to pray. There is such power in people praying for each other. And I don't know that we know that power and how strong that is, but I believe it is life-saving. And when people unite and call on the power of God for one individual is huge. So huge. So thank you. Anything else you want to share?
It was amazing. Something that I would never, like I said, I'd never wish on anyone. I'd like to say that I would have not let it happen if I could, but I also feel like it needed to happen and that I don't think that I'm the only person that learned lessons from it. And I like to think that it helped someone else and hopefully someone listening. If they're searching for something, that it could be an answer, possibly if they're having doubts about whether God can really tell what it is that they're struggling with or going through, that it might help them to know that he's right there and he knows us better, I think, than we know ourselves. And he doesn't make us qualify for his help and for his love. It's just there for us whenever we need it.
Amen to that. I love that we don't have to qualify for his love. It's available. Oh, I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to my story.
All right, well, that wraps up another great episode of Wonders and Miracles. Thank you, Sammy, for sharing that tender story and the lessons you've learned. So powerful. I feel like what you shared was very edifying, and we all need to have reminders of that all the time. I hope you have a great week. Thanks for listening to the show. Remember to lift and edify others. And we're going to close with our scripture again. Job 37:5 and Ezekiel 2:2. God thundered marvelously with his voice. Great things doeth he, which we cannot comprehend. And the Spirit entered into me when he spake unto me, and set me upon my feet, and I heard him that spake unto me. I hope you can think of a time when you have heard the Lord's voice and it spoke to you in the way you needed it to speak to you. And remember to notice and celebrate miracles everywhere, because the more miracles we notice, the more miracles happen.